guys, Sullivan Owen here in Philadelphia. Today I'm going to be expanding on my new garden from scratch, the peach garden that I shared the other day. That was really a made-up garden, but as I looked at the board, I thought it was really pretty. There was some interesting things, some plants that I already own, and since I have to design a new section of my big giant border that's heading into the new revamped potager area of my garden, I thought that I would draw for you guys on camera while I take you through some of these plants, some of my thoughts, and just kind of do a quick demo of how I take these concept boards, plants that I either already own, plants that are in the ground, things that I have on order, and things that I'm considering, and kind of put that all together into a plan. So let's draw. Okay, so first up, this is the demo board that I made for the fictitious, made-up designing a new garden from scratch. So I took that and I edited it into 3 slides. I tried to name the gardens. I'm not sure that brick, lavender, and peach is really like the correct name for what we're talking about, but for now, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. So I took some of the plants from this page, and you'll see them spread throughout the remaining 3 slides. Jumping back all the way back here, this is an update to things that are already existing in the border that I'm going to sketch for you guys. This includes plants from the last 3 seasons, including bulbs that have been planted in this garden for the last couple of years. They obviously are not all blooming at the same time, and I kind of have them clustered: iris, peonies, some roses, and then the assorted bulbs. But I just leave the bulbs in place. If they come back, it's exciting. I added a whole bunch of purple tones, lavender tones to this bed. These are plants that I have on order. I keep a spreadsheet of this information, but I do find that it's helpful to pull them out of the spreadsheet and put them here. I ordered some roses in like a fit of weakness. There's probably 2 things I don't need more of: roses or peonies, and iris, and dahlia. Anyway, I don't need more of most things, but I ordered them anyway. So I have them on here. I don't know that they're all gonna work. I have ordered all of this as bare root. I actually have some of this autumn brilliance fern, and I'm overwintering. Then what I ended up doing with this page is that these were all plants from the demo garden that I liked. I have this Carly Rose grass outside the fence. I have some violet dusk baptisia. I actually dug it out of the ground and stored the roots because it just wasn't in a good place, and baptisia is very hard to relocate. So I actually have some reservations about putting it back. I don't want to potentially dig things up in my garden all the time, but because things are still in flux around here, it's hard for me. It was a lot to dig up these plants that had been in place for just like 18 months. It was hard. Twilight zone grass, I have this outside my fence. So some of these are things that I can take divisions of to add. I probably have a heuchera option. I don't know that I necessarily need this one. And, I don't know that I need a nandina based on some of the other stuff that I already have. I have this kind of Elianus. I have this couple giant 9-barks. I planted a 4-trunk crepe myrtle. I have a golden raspberry bush. I just added this rose, which I think is Belinda's blush. It's at the very far, far, far end of this border, but it's technically the same border. The Ember Waves arborvitae are intended to go outside the fence, but outside the fence with some brick red moments in front of it. So I don't know how much of my videos you've watched, but I am definitely trying to make a connection between what's happening outside the fence and what's happening when you're looking at the border. So I've been trying to find this arborvitae for 4 years now. Monrovia says they can ship it to me this spring. We shall see. Tubers, I have a lot of choices if I decide to make space for dahlias in here. Not necessarily sure all of these bare roots have to go in here. They're all colors that I think work really well in other parts of my garden, but they all felt like good options. And then I ordered far too many hellebore plugs in the fall and still have about a half a tray of each of these available. Now that we've kind of looked through some of the plants, this was the original demo board. I really like this, but I actually tend to prefer the contrast of adding some of these purple, plum, and like rusty red tones to that palette. Move this over so that you can see the iPad. So this is the drawing that I have landed on for the Potager. I'm going to show you how first I'm going to duplicate it and expand it. So the app I'm using is Procreate. I am still really enjoying learning the Morpholio Trace app. I am just not fast enough to do that on camera without feeling like I'm making you guys bored silly. So we can mirror those lines. So right out here, I have a telephone pole. So right now the border line goes like, it just sort of like dead ends. So this whole thing will need some tweaking. I don't want it to feel too much like too swoopy. Like that feels kooky. And yet if I go for this aggressive line here, it sort of feels like it should do this, which leaves, there's the island bed, and this would be lawn, which to talk to Tim. I rarely say that when I'm talking about garden stuff, but once upon a time he had wanted to have a little more lawn and a little less flower border. But if he has changed his mind about that, mostly because it's been so difficult to mow our very weedy lawn, perhaps this is a possibility. So if that's the case, then we are looking at, let's do some quick sketching of just the structural elements that are already in here. Back over here is the big magnolia. Those are the 9 barks. Crepe myrtle. The Eleagnus. I'm gonna have to, Eleagnus does not sound suitable for, let's just call it a faux olive. So this is sort of where things dead end currently. definitely. What else? Oh, we have the raspberry. I have to put some kind of barrier around the raspberry this year because I did no-dig beds and have been piling mulch and compost onto these beds for 2+ years. The raspberry is just sending out shoots every which way. So this year I will be putting some kind of circular containment around it because it gets into everything and it's really hard to pull up. I can understand now why everybody said to put those kind of berries into raised beds. I don't know if you guys can hear. There's a cat snoring next to me. All right, so then the bowl, I'm not going to draw in detail. It's a very large space. But I think that's the major structural elements. I did a lot of work heading into the fall season in straightening out some placement of some of the peonies, things like that. This area is a lot more open right now. And I hate to think about moving this tree, but I'm going to have to think very hard about what these lines look like. Because right now, this bed makes sense because it's sort of symmetrical with this line being accurate. But if we continue it, I don't know that I want this to feel like a separate garden. I want them to have like a little bit more flow. But so plants that I'm considering one of these big cedars. I really do love, this is called a golden deodar cedar. This one's called snow sprite. Mostly you can find the common blue deodar cedars around. I just haven't found, I have 2 tiny ones I'm growing, but not sure. But perhaps, since this is dedicated to covering up the telephone pole, perhaps that will be enough to kind of serve as like a dividing line so that these feel. Welcome to my world. This is why I don't do live drawing videos, because I could be here for a year. All right, so I think in all the videos, I have said that I wanted to do some kind of interesting deciduous tree here. Now, I'm dying to have a purple foliage plum tree somewhere, or purple leaf cherry. But I do think that this Persian ironwood, which is a more upright tulip type shaped tree that gets this like gorgeous rusty iron toned fall foliage and is this really cool like acidy yellow green. So it's Persian ironwood. I've only found them a couple places, but there's one nursery I can think of that usually has a couple of them around, and I used to design with this plant in the fall. And I think it's a really, really beautiful tree. Underrated in terms of floral arranging because the leaves can start to look a little beat up or they get really mottled in texture, but I think a very, very beautiful tree. So I would put that into this area. And I guess I'm trying to not look down too much. So we'll try drawing upright. So this does give me, this is likely to be a little bit of pockets of shade back here. Let me make sure you can see everything. Pockets of shade where maybe some of that hellebore can go. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge amount of space because I can say that almost everything on this page currently is in here. Oh, I didn't show you where those ember waves are supposed to go, if they show. I've been looking for these shrubs for so long. I have space outside the fence to do them. Kind of not in a straight line, but it's gonna take some finesse to get them to feel. I do not love arborvitae, green arborvitae. I understand their purpose. I understand that lots of people will think, seeing these, that mine have died. And I think that's okay because, you know, that used to be the hallmark of some arborvitaes. They would die each winter. Especially people who do those big shrub. I think they're hardier now, but it just... Look, you can see in the photo, this is a Monrovia photo, they've got Nandina around it. It's the right texture and color for what I'm looking for out there. I just don't want them to feel like a little trio of bowling pins or a straight line. It's just like I struggled to find my way to work with things like boxwoods. I think the arborvitae are going to be one for me. So yeah, it's a lot of space, but just to kind of show you how I don't tend to get into like a super micro level about what goes where. But if all of this exists within this space, then, and I can tell you that just based on me being a crazy person, I know that around here, I have some lavender toned peonies. And then most of my coral colored peonies are in here. And I have some Ito small low growing ones, let's say they're around there. So in order for this to not feel choppy and disconnected, I would likely look to add in a pocket of maybe like a foxgloves in the peachy color. And then mirror that with the more purpley color heading back in here. Let's say I did a Nandina or something there. Then I could do something that's like a little more pinky toned, like the Philopendula. So when I say I do color groupings, I'm still mixing in some things that have some contrast. I think that all of these plants play well together. They also, not that we can go through that now, are blooming at different times. So the majority of the mid to late season bloom is in the lavender color because so much of the coral and brick color comes from the peonies. Most of that brick, dark rose red color is gone from this bed into spring, at the end of spring. From kind of late June through the rest of the year, it feels very lavender, which is why I think adding in some things that have some more contrast, like the peachy toned roses, like adding in peach colored dahlias rather than lavender dahlias, which would also work. I just don't want it to feel like this color. Even though I did this as a demo for you guys, for me, in my gardens, I'm always trying to bring in like a pop color to help everything feel cohesive. Somebody asked a great question on the peach garden video. How do you transition from one color to the next? And this is the way to do that. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as peach and purple, or kind of orange and purple, but you want to find yourself places where you can start to add in something that helps transition the colors together. So if this is majority lavender over here, then we're going to start looking to pull in, and we know that we want everything over here to be peach into the orange color, let's say. It's where you start to mix these things in. And you still are bringing in some pops of the purple and the lavender before you go like full coral. I hope that makes sense. Obviously, it's very challenging to demonstrate when I'm still figuring out what the plants are, but I wonder if I can find. That's why I couldn't find it. Okay, so 6 years later, I found what I was looking for. So this is how I would think about transitioning color. These are actually very rough interpretations of the color flow that I had been, I think this is from last August that I started playing with this. So when I'm saying I have these brick tones, we need a watercolor brush. So this is how I would put in something like the idea for the arborvitae, which would be outside the fence and be this sort of wash of color. And I guess I don't have the magnolia in here because we didn't own it. And some of this has changed to include so one is more abstract, obviously. One is a little more about kind of blocking out fields of color. I would strongly encourage, if you're trying to get into sketching or kind of playing, to play with different brushes and textures and ideas. I do think this is a little more helpful in terms of, for somebody who thinks in color palettes like I do. Like this is truly the colors that I planted in the island, except that I can tell you that I ended up doing, because this area gets a little more shade because we have a red maple up here, that I went for the lightest colors into kind of golden, into peach, into kind of copper, into like truly rust. So that's how I ended up planting the bulbs. And I think it will work really well, because then I have this kind of very pale pink thing happening over here, but I ended up working some more kind of red, rusty, pinky tones, more lavender, And here's where I think when I've been playing with this a year or two ago, I thought I would do more golden in that back corner, but I'm just realizing how much peach I have. So that's how you can kind of think about blending the colors together rather than making just big swaths of like chunk with a line. Unless your garden is laid out in strictly raised beds, in which case you should definitely just try to keep the colors together. That seems to me like that would be the easiest way. Plus, if you had them in confined bed spaces, you would know I don't need to buy any more of X, Y, and Z color. Instead of, for all my organization, I still just like back into all of this stuff because I go crazy buying stuff in the middle of winter and then have to find places to put it. So, all right, so let's... All right, guys, I hope this was helpful in expanding on how you can work on designing or continuing to expand or add on to an existing garden space. I really did enjoy making up a kind of garden from scratch, but I think for my situation where I have so much stuff in progress, this is probably a little more real world applicable. And certainly I own a lot of stuff to support this color story and this design. It's just going to come down to, I like to use neon colored rope and just getting out there once the weather stabilizes a little. 60 degrees this morning, 20 degrees tonight. Things are still real weird. But I like to lay out the beds with neon rope so I can figure out, I think this line is going to end up being the biggest issue is, I need like such a contrast color at this point. I'm using a watercolor brush now. Not helpful. But to me, before I can really drill down on what goes where, I have to figure out, is this the way to do it, or is this the way to do it? I mean, I know which way I think it should go. We'll see what Tim thinks. Personally, I would like as little grass to mow as possible. So if I could make the entire thing different gardens, I would do that. I'm not sure he's there yet, but maybe another hot, sweaty summer of mowing the grass with our battery-operated mower will cure him of his wanting to have grass everywhere. All right, guys, thank you so much. I will see you in the next one.